Okay, we go to Mr. Lee Zeldin of New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our witnesses for being here today. First, with regards to a treaty, I'm someone who believes that the President is negotiating a treaty. It should be treated as such. I believe our Founding Fathers would agree with that. The President would try to argue precedent. We have the Constitution of the United States, which I believe has a process in place that should be respected. As far as sanctions, the President talks about snapback. For a sanction that may take several years to put into place, I think in reality it's fantasy land if you think you can just click your heels back together and sanctions that take that long to put into place. If Iran has a violation, that all of a sudden they're just going to be snapped back. And I think that my constituents and the American people are starting to catch on to that. It's important to understand where we are right now. The President just 3 weeks ago, he announces a framework agreement. He puts out a fact sheet. Within 24 hours, the Iranian foreign minister is on his official Twitter feed calling it just a spin. The Ayatollah is on the streets chanting death to America. In order to have an agreement, both sides have to agree to material terms. We are talking about a framework as if the Iranians actually agree to it. I think that one thing that might have been agreed to 3 weeks ago at the table is that both sides were agreeing to go back to their home countries and spin wherever they thought we were at that moment, this moment in these talks, to whatever best serves their own domestic politics. I have concern about critical components where if there is no agreement, that it can be worded in a broad, vague way for each side to interpret the agreement differently. And we may be presented an agreement in English that may not be accurately translated, so there are multiple levels to the complication. So we may be interpreting agreement that the Iranians interpret completely differently. We already know what the President is going to say if he reaches an agreement, no matter what the agreement says. He may say this agreement is good for the United States, good for our allies, and good for the safety of the entire world. He may say compliance will be certified by the International Atomic Energy Agency. That sounds familiar. Those were Bill Clinton's words, 1994, October 18th. Announcing a nuclear agreement with North Korea, and we all know how that turned out. What else will he say? He'll tell us this is a good deal that prevents Iran from having a nuclear weapon. Well, what isn't included in this deal? We aren't talking about Iran, state sponsors of terrorism. We're not talking about their work to overthrow foreign governments, pledging to erase Israel from the map, chanting death to America. This doesn't include their development of ICBMs or their unjustly holding, imprisoning United States citizens. Right now, a lot of people, a lot of our constituents are watching the playoffs. Basketball is going on, hockey. These are 7-game series. The first team that wins 4 wins the series. You move on. The President is, this is like the #1 seed, United States of America. We're going up against a mediocre Division II basketball team. And we decided to give up our first 3 games. We're now trailing in the 4th game. The President should call a timeout, he should take a walk, take a breath, and come back with a stronger hand. This is the United States of America. There's no reason that we should be playing as if these are our equals, and it's not that hard for him to do that. My question for our witnesses here this morning is this. There was some chatter about legislation and one proposal that these talks require Iran to recognize Israel's right to exist. With the Ayatollah in the streets chanting death to America while these negotiations are going on, blowing up mock U.S. warships and everything else they're doing wrong, should these talks include Iran recognizing America's right to exist?
I've not heard that they dispute America's right to exist. I don't know that that needs to be established as a precondition. On the question,
with all due respect, they're in the streets chanting "Death to America."
Right.
They're blowing up our warships. There is plenty of evidence that they are not recognizing our right to exist. When they're chanting "Death to America," that's pretty much, when it's coming from the Ayatollah, indicating that they are not recognizing our right to exist.
Well, this goes back to the issue of compartmentalization that we discussed with Congressman Issa. The philosophy of this negotiation is we can, set aside the issue of Israel, set aside the threats against America over political issues. We're just going to focus on the nuclear issue and try and solve that. and hope that in solving that, we don't compound the problems in these other compartments. It's a legitimate question whether that's doable. On your point about you raised the question about the treaty, whether this is a treaty, and I'd spoken to that earlier, and let me just say, the political reality is the President's not going to submit this agreement to congressional review unless Congress passes a law requiring him to do so, and that's what they're working on over in the Senate, and hopefully that's what this committee will be able to work on at some point in the future. But absent the enactment of legislation, I don't think you're going to have any meaningful congressional review at all.
And just with sake of my time, because it is expiring, I don't believe that Congress has to, because you just hold up the Constitution of the United States. This is a treaty, in my opinion. This is a treaty. We don't have to pass something that requires the President to do that. Just because the President is going to play by his own set of rules and he's going to get played at the negotiating table doesn't mean that I need to play along, that my colleagues need to play along as well. I yield back the balance of my time.